I'll explain everything about your hip, and I'll share something you've likely never heard before now, I promise. Here, you'll learn how to use your hips in a way that ensures they remain pain-free and wear-free throughout your entire life. Because pain and arthritis don't necessarily have to be part of aging. And don't worry if you're already experiencing pain. In this video, you'll learn how to eliminate it yourself, completely without surgery or medication. Look, this here is the hip joint, and as you can observe, the hip joint is specifically designed to provide an exceptionally wide range of motion. Forward, backward, a bit more limited, then it can move to the side, it can rotate inward. When playing soccer, you need that inward movement of the foot, and the joint can handle all of that, so it has a very large range of motion. The problem today is that we no longer make full use this range of motion anywhere near how it was biologically designed to be used. Why? Because who really does a full straddle? Who actually takes their leg all the way back there, huh? Or we take it really far inward. The only thing we actually do with the leg is move it forward and then bring it back to a neutral stance. Nothing more than that, really, you know? And that's simply not enough. And as a result, certain muscles, certain fasciae keep getting shorter, keep getting tighter, and increasingly more tense. And this tension leads to improper strain. That strain naturally causes wear and tear because the forces increase when there's so much tension in the system. Let's first take a look at how a joint works. In the case of the hip joint, there's a socket. And the head of the femur basically sits inside it. And there you have cartilage. Let's color it green for clarity. And over here, you'll also notice cartilage. And this specific cartilage here is crucial. It makes sure the movement is nice and smooth. Cartilage is nourished through compression. When it's pressed, like a sponge, it releases fluid, allowing nutrients to circulate and keep it healthy. And when it's released again, it soaks up fluid like a sponge, replenishing itself. In the joint capsule between the cartilage and throughout that space, there's synovial fluid, and this fluid essentially carries the nutrients that feed the cartilage. So when the pressure is taken off and it absorbs fluid again, that's how it gets nourished. So cartilage is nourished only in the very, very bottom layer through the blood supply, and the rest of it gets its nutrients through this continuous pressing and unloading mechanism. But if the movement is now limited, that means normally the bone here would move, let's say, up to that point, or potentially even further, depending on the range of motion available within that joint. Then, a significant contact surface would compress during the movements and then release as the counter movements take place, allowing for smooth joint function over time. The more restricted the movement is. So if this angle, and eventually even that angle, is lost, and everything only happens within a very limited range, then the cartilage doesn't get nearly enough nourishment. The cartilage starves. So if you give a person too little to eat, they lose weight, and if they don't get anything to eat for a long time, they won't be able to survive eventually. And ultimately, the same principle applies to cartilage. When movement becomes increasingly limited over time, the cartilage's nourishment and supply gradually diminish as a direct consequence of that restriction. And as a result, the movement becomes increasingly smaller, the range of motion continues to decrease, tensions and shortening intensify, and the pressure within the joint steadily grows over time. And you can imagine that like a mortar. If we have a mortar and a pestle, that's supposed to grind things inside it, small things like peppercorns or something similar. Then you can imagine, at the moment when the pestle, with just a bit of pressure applied, moves gently back and forth inside the rounded bowl structure. Not much will get damaged at the bottom because everything moves quite lightly. But if the muscles in this figurative example cause the plunger to be pushed downward with significantly greater pressure and moved forcefully under this increased pressure, then naturally the impact and strain on the mechanism will be much more pronounced. What's inside the mortar is crushed into small pieces. And the same thing essentially happens in the joint. At the precise moment when the pressure exerted by the muscles on the joint becomes excessively intense and the joint is moved, it wears down significantly more than it would if the pressure were maintained at a normal, healthy level. And that leads to osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis essentially means that the thickness of the joint cartilage keeps diminishing because the repair mechanisms can no longer keep pace with the ongoing destruction. We generally assume that whenever a joint is moved, there's always a certain level of wear and tear occurring over time naturally. But the body has its own repair mechanisms. And it's known that in joints, particularly those with arthritis, where there's significant wear and tear occurring, that stem cells have been discovered there, and their main function is to repair the damage that happens in those regions. But the moment the pressure becomes so immense that the body can no longer keep up with the repairs, we assume that osteoarthritis continues to advance steadily, and eventually it's bone directly grinding on bone, at which point, for instance, an artificial joint is surgically implanted. But now think about it logically. The old joint, the original one, was ultimately destroyed because of insufficient movement and excessive pressure over time. If the artificial joint is now installed, the pressure remains exactly the same as before. And please don't think that artificial joints don't wear out. It's just that the wear looks different. High-strength materials I come from mechanical engineering produce extremely fine dust particles, and those particles end up inside the body, which nobody wants, of course. Apart from that, artificial joints are always somehow attached to the bone, using various techniques and methods to secure them properly. But the greater the forces acting there, the more likely it is that the artificial joint will loosen, resulting in a variety of potential complications. And then you need be operated again, and so on and so forth. We know this from medicine. These joints have to be replaced. And the problem is, you can only replace them once, maybe twice at most, and then there's no bone left anymore, leaving you with fewer and fewer options to effectively repair or fully restore it. So in the end, that doesn't solve the problem, because let's keep in mind the core issue fundamentally stems from the excessive tension within the muscles and the fascia. I don't want to conclude from this that I generally advise against surgeries or artificial joints. Artificial joints can be a blessing. When the joint is destroyed, the hip socket completely ruined, nothing left at all, then we're glad when skilled people, skilled surgeons, implant an artificial joint so that one doesn't have to end up in a wheelchair. Or even after accidents when bodily structures are destroyed. Surgery is necessary in those cases, and it's a truly excellent and effective option. But only in cases where that hasn't yet happened and the joint damage hasn't progressed too significantly, we'd suggest taking a closer look to explore what other treatment options might still be available. Before we dive into what other solutions might be available, we should first take a moment to understand how pain arises according to our model. Here we have the hip socket, and inside it, the head of the femur moves around smoothly and naturally with remarkable ease. We had mentioned that here is the cartilage, which effectively cushions the entire joint, and the only structures responsible for moving this femur are, indeed, the muscles. Now, for instance, muscles are actively pulling in this direction, so in the opposite direction there must be some flexibility or movement to ensure that the action can occur smoothly and efficiently. And at the moment when the muscles pull over to this side, there's a slight tension, represented by this small arrow right here. And this tension ensures that the joint head moves smoothly within the socket, guided by its geometry, allowing it to function and be positioned in the most optimal and efficient way possible. Moving optimally means using as little force as possible, minimizing wear and tear, and allowing for easy movement. At the moment when we have these two forces, we can closely observe and thoroughly analyze where the total force is being directed. You can determine the resultant force by constructing a parallelogram. And you'll observe that the resultant already shifts slightly in a different direction, which is entirely normal and to be expected in such cases. And the body calculates this normally so that it can move in a way that gets it where it wants to go. The entire program is mapped in the brain and is continuously being optimized there. If a person moves less over a longer period and doesn't actively compensate for it, while the muscles keep resisting more and more strongly, then an additional force is added to this control tension. One that, in a sense, stubbornly refuses to let go. If this side here is too short, it doesn't want to let go, then it pulls against it. If you now construct the force parallelogram again, then you see, oh, this force. It's barely contributing to any movement at all. There's already a substantial amount of result showing up in this particular scenario. Here, that goes into the joint. It's already exerting significantly more pressure against the cartilage, just as we discussed earlier with the mortar example, than it ideally should be. And at some point, the opposing forces become so great that no more movement can occur, because the force in the joint is, so to speak, exhausted. And then they say the joint is locked. It's a terrible situation because the person can practically no longer move their leg, leaving them almost completely unable to function properly. Throughout all these processes, and please make it clear that the pressure inside the joint keeps increasing throughout all these processes. The body continuously monitors and measures what's happening in the joint. With countless receptors, they measure tension, they measure pressure, they measure speed, they even measure acceleration or deceleration processes. And all of that, this massive flood of data, gets processed in the brain, which then draws meaningful and insightful conclusions from it. And our model now includes the following situation. If the body determines that, due to all these shortenings, the force directed into the joint, which naturally also significantly increases wear and tear over time than it normally would be, as we discussed earlier, then at some point, at a certain force, at a certain counterpole, the body notices now the force is so great that the destruction in the joint surpasses its inherent ability to repair itself. And that's exactly when the brain intervenes with what we've come to refer to as the alarm pain. And the alarm pain, which I'll draw here as a big red arrow, the alarm pain is meant to prevent the wear from becoming excessive, to ensure the joint isn't damaged, and to stop any further harm from occurring in that specific area. Because then the human being simply wouldn't survive. That, in our experience and based on our understanding, is essentially a mechanism that's built into the body. So let's summarize again. The movement is insufficient, tensions arise, excessive forces. On one hand, wear and tear is triggered by this, while on the other hand, this produces the alarm pain. And what's now extremely, extremely important to understand, I'll make a bold line here, is that this whole area where the pain is located involves the brain projecting it to that spot, so the person reacts by avoiding certain movements, essentially adapting their behavior to protect themselves from further harm or discomfort, altering their actions. So that no damage occurs, that's one process, and the other process is what's actually taking place directly within the joint itself, within its structural components. And these two processes are entirely separate and distinct from each other, at least in the majority of cases. We know this because there are a significant number of people who have osteoarthritis but don't experience any pain whatsoever. This goes up to the 4th degree. 4th degree means bone on bone. So even in the most severe cases of arthritis, there are instances, and we've experienced this time and time again, having seen it hundreds of times over the last 20 years, that people have no cartilage remaining, the structure is entirely compromised, yet there is still no pain present. And that is, of course, extremely important for the consideration of what benefit surgery would bring now. Because if the pain, which is the reason most surgeries are performed, if that pain has nothing to do with osteoarthritis or only in very, very rare instances, then it would indeed be very questionable. It's very important to try and see if there's any truth to it. And the test is basically quite simple. You identify, eliminate, and normalize the excessive tensions that, as per our model, are the primary cause of triggering the pain. And if then the muscles no longer pull as much, and the pain is reduced or completely gone, it means that the osteoarthritis, which is still present in the joint, has nothing to do with the pain. Otherwise, it'd still hurt. And again, back to osteoarthritis. We had mentioned that it progresses because the greater pressure during movement, similar to a mortar and pestle, which we used as an example, leads to increased wear and tear on the cartilage over time, causing more damage. Then it can be repaired because of the pressure. But let's not forget, earlier we discussed the role of nutrition. Now take a moment to visualize the femur as it moves through wide and highly dynamic ranges of motion within the joint, covering significant distances. Then the contact area. is practically spread across the entire cartilage surface. That means during a large movement, especially when moving into all extreme angles now and then, the cartilage is consistently well compressed in all its regions. Waste products are effectively pushed out and fully released while fresh nutrients flow in. The more the range of motion becomes restricted, the less the entire cartilage gets repeatedly and regularly compressed, allowing it to fully relax and recover. That means the nutrition decreases. And these two effects create the ultimate dead end for every joint because they lead to two major problems: the excessive pressure combined with the grinding effect of the mortar, and the limited range of motion, which further diminishes the supply of essential nutrients to the cartilage over time. The combination of both leads to the cartilage being ground down and starved, and that's precisely what we observe in a significant number of older individuals, where progressively more osteoarthritis and persistent pain tend to develop over time. When everyone thinks it's normal, in reality, though, it's due to these effects. And here it also becomes crucial that nutrition, of course, plays an absolutely enormous role in this, because it's about the nutrition of the cartilage. Where does it ultimately come from? From what we eat. And now you can easily consider this. If I've purchased the materials for building a house from a discount store, the quality isn't going to be particularly high or durable, correct? It's the same principle when it comes to nutrition and cartilage health. The structure won't last as long, won't hold as much, it's not as high quality. If I'm aiming to build a house that truly endures, I'll make sure to acquire the perfect materials. The optimal material we seek out is the essential nourishment we consume every single day. And that's precisely why Petra, my wife, who is a nutritional medicine specialist, consistently highlights the critical importance of consuming plants, embracing a plant-based diet, and occasionally allowing yourself a few exceptions along the way. But a large part of your diet should consist of plants because they contain the substances that, in turn, ensure that the nutrition of the cartilage is much higher quality, and therefore, the cartilage can survive much better. And there's another role that nutrition plays, namely, the less the food creates tensions, such as muscle tensions that elevate the tone, the better the overall outcome. Because, as we've already observed, excessive tensions are indeed the main issue with the hip. So if I now make the choice to eat food that promotes relaxation and alleviates muscle tension, then it's extremely beneficial and significantly better than consuming food that causes the muscles to become overly tight and strained. It's widely recognized that plant-based foods lead to significantly lower levels of tension in the body, particularly when compared to the effects of consuming an excessive amount of animal-based products. And that's yet another reason behind it. I had specifically promised those of you already experiencing pain that I would outline potential solutions. And the solution comes directly from what I've explained. Just focus on doing exercises that help normalize the tension in these muscles and fascia, and then simply observe the changes that occur. And the great thing about it is there's absolutely no downside, no disadvantage whatsoever. At worst, nothing happens, or at best, something positive occurs, and the pain actually decreases significantly. And we know from 38 years of experience that in the vast majority of cases, these excessive tensions in the muscles and fascia are truly the main underlying cause of most pain-related problems. And not least because of that, we've managed to gather an impressive number of over 2 million subscribers on our YouTube channel. You can easily look up these exercises. You can also directly enter a keyword like hip pain or anything else that describes pain in the hip area under a different name. You can do the exercises and try them out. Trust what your body tells you. Don't believe me. Don't put your complete trust in anyone else who has something to say about it. Especially when it comes to whether osteoarthritis hurts or not. That's actually quite unknown knowledge. That's not yet known to many people. The best thing is to ask and listen to your own body. Just go ahead and give the exercise a try, and if the pain starts to decrease, then your body is clearly signaling the truth to you, whether it's actually helping or not. If you're feeling a bit unsure because you might already have severe arthritis in the joint. Since 2007, we have in total trained over 15,000 doctors, physiotherapists, and alternative practitioners in our specialized therapy techniques, methods, and approaches. There, it's possible already during the initial treatment to normalize the tension, at least for a short while, through specific osteopressure points. These are pressure points located directly on the bone, to see if the pain originates from that specific area. And if you're unsure, then give such a treatment a try and let someone guide you through the process. And the therapist also takes the time to draw out the corresponding exercises right away. And beyond that, just go ahead and read some comments. We have testimonials in our app, as well as on our YouTube channel or other social media platforms. Just go ahead and read through what's written there. Then you'll see from hundreds, even thousands of people, how much it has truly helped them. And it's so important that you also have these experiences and ultimately pass them on to others as well. So it's really, really important that as many people as possible experience this. This knowledge really should be part of every school curriculum and definitely included in medical school or the training of physiotherapists and alternative practitioners like naturopaths. Because people need to learn how they can help themselves, because in the vast majority of situations, it's super simple. You just need to know how and practice the specific exercises tailored for those particular pains. So you see, the ability to take care of the pain by yourself plays a really big role for us. By doing our exercises, which you can look up online and then easily follow along or find in our books that we've written, you just follow along. And by doing that, you help yourself and can immediately see the results, giving you clear insight into what works. So you can take your time to review everything, as I've explained a lot and gone into many details. Check for more information on our website. You'll be thrilled, where you can calmly go through everything once more and form your own perspective and understanding. And the great thing is, you can even print it out. Always have it on hand and store it with you.